He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Omar, so how cautious should we be that this is only the first phase of a very complicated deal and there's a long road ahead of us here, isn't there?
Certainly, it's a desperately needed ceasefire to, 2 years of an absolutely brutal and sadistic genocide that has been imposed on Gaza, that has destroyed Gaza, that has broken countless records in terms of the numbers of children who have been killed and dismembered, the number of journalists who have been killed, and the number of medics and UN workers, and the list just goes on and on and on. But it is really important to remember that this is only an agreement on phase one. This is an exchange of captives. This is stopping the large-scale killing that is going on in Gaza and allowing some more humanitarian aid in. But there's no telling whether there's going to be a resumption of this genocide, whether Netanyahu, as he has done many times before, his record is lengthy in terms of breaking ceasefires and finding a reason to go back to the killing. He's done it in Gaza many times. He's currently doing it in Lebanon as we speak, where there's an ongoing one-sided war against Lebanon in violation of the ceasefire reached there. And then there's the question of, after Israel spent 2 years destroying Gaza as part of an ethnic cleansing effort to make it so that there's nothing for Palestinians to return to, is Israel actually going to allow Gaza to be rebuilt? That's a very big question. I think it is infinitely more likely that Netanyahu is going to be trying everything he possibly can to leave Gaza in ruin so that life is simply not possible for Palestinians in Gaza, as part of encouraging more and more people to leave to achieve his ethnic cleansing effort and what he described at some point as thinning the population in Gaza down to a minimum. Those are still big unanswered questions about the future. But in the meantime, certainly it's a welcome relief from the killing that Gaza's people finally get a moment to breathe.
Yeah, Omar, so what do you think then this deal means for the people of Gaza? I mean, as you've been telling us, they've suffered death and destruction on an industrial scale under the genocidal violence for 2 years, just over 2 years. Momentous time, but still very cautious about the future of this deal.
Yes, the people of Gaza are past the worst with this. It's unclear how long-term that's going to be. But more fundamentally, the reason why we are here in the first place, if you look at the broader dynamic, there is a dynamic of Israeli control and domination over the lives of Palestinians, where Palestinians are simply not a free people in their own land, and that is why there is a so-called conflict. And there is simply no indication that that part is going to be dealt with. Netanyahu has made clear over and over again that there is never going to be a Palestinian state, that Israel is going to maintain control between the river and the sea, control over Palestinian lives where they have absolutely no rights, no right to movement, no right to water. I mean, it's a system of apartheid. So occupation and apartheid continue, which means we are simply stuck in a dynamic that is guaranteeing a future crisis. So in a way, as desperate as we are to celebrate the fact that the killing is going to come to an end for now, we cannot celebrate the possibility of a long-term solution because justice has not been achieved for Palestinians, and there's no indication that either Donald Trump or Netanyahu have any intention of pushing Israel in a direction where recognizes Palestinians as equal human beings, validates their humanity and respects their rights. And as long as we don't get there, I'm afraid that we're going to be stuck in a very ugly dynamic for a very, very long time.
So let's just touch quickly on the future of the Palestinian state. I mean, the UN Secretary General released a statement. He said the deal should recognize the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people and lead to a two-state solution. But I mean, how far away from that, realistically, though, Omar, are we now?
The so-called two-state solution is nowhere in sight. I mean, we've seen pretty significant diplomatic moves recognizing a Palestinian state internationally. There's almost an international consensus in recognition of Palestine. But what does that mean when on the ground, Israel is systematically dismantling any possibility for a viable Palestinian state? When Israeli illegal settlement expansion continues unabated throughout the West Bank, in which Israeli settler terrorism against Palestinian residents is ongoing, Palestinian homes are being demolished, Palestinians are being driven out, and simply there is no level of control over their own lives in Palestine. You can't move from one Palestinian town to another without going through an Israeli checkpoint. You can't travel to the outside world without having to go through an Israeli, passport control. There's simply all of Palestinian life is under Israeli control, and that control is being tightened bit by bit. And Netanyahu is making clear that the more international recognition there's going to be, the tighter Israel is going to hold on to the Palestinian territories. So what you actually need is meaningful consequences on Israel. What you need is the real diplomatic and military and economic isolation of Israel to force it to alter its behavior. And until that happens, we are not going to see Israel change its behavior, which means we're not going to see a prospect for Palestinian self-determination to be respected. And to this point, we have not seen meaningful actions against Israel. We've only seen symbolic ones. And you cannot respond symbolically to a state that is acting in concrete ways with overwhelming violence to destroy the possibility of Palestinian self-determination.
Omar, just a final point to you on what this deal then means for Hamas. We've talked about what it means for Palestinians and the people of Gaza. I mean, the only leverage that Hamas really has is the captives. What guarantees do they have then that once the captives are released, that Israel won't renege on the deal again? Let's remind ourselves that Israel unilaterally collapsed the ceasefire deal back in March. What's to stop Netanyahu from doing it again?
Frankly, I think we should be clear about the fact that the hostages were never leveraged in the hands of Hamas, for that matter, because the Israeli government had absolutely no regard to whether they're going to get the hostages back safe. If they wanted to, they would not have continued this onslaught on Gaza for 2 years and have not killed dozens and dozens of their hostages, infinitely more hostages killed by Israel than rescued by the Israeli military. That is not the behavior of a country that is acting as if it cares about its own hostages. And therefore, Hamas understood that the hostages were not really leveraged, that you could not stop the genocide simply based on the hostages. So there are no guarantees that Netanyahu is not going to return to the genocide. This is simply about public opinion and public pressure. And I think Hamas is essentially in a moment of desperation after the people, Palestinians in Gaza, endured the unimaginable, to say, okay, fine, give up this point that seems to be the rallying cry for Israel to maintain international sympathy, that they have to do what they're allegedly have to massacre Palestinians as part of an effort to get the hostages back. If you give up the hostages, Israel doesn't have that excuse anymore. But in material terms, for people who know that this was never Israel's primary concern, that the primary concern is an effort to eliminate Palestinian existence between the river and the sea, that project is very much going to remain in the hands of Netanyahu and potentially ongoing. And it's only a matter of time before Netanyahu finds a way to go back to it in one form or another. Frankly, it's not going to stop. It is ongoing in the West Bank and may very well continue in Gaza. But it is simply taking an argument away, taking an excuse away that allows Israel to do this with some level of impunity in the hopes that the international community is going to live up to its responsibility in this moment, to live up to the weight of the atrocity that we're witnessing, and to finally say enough is enough and put an end to Israel's rogue behavior.
Omar Badar, really good to get your thoughts and your analysis here. Omar Badar, political analyst there and former deputy director of the Arab American Institute. Thank you.
Thank you.